I often think of September 1st, 1939. I think the historians say that's the day that Adolf Hitler invaded Poland. So that for me is sort of a historical landmark. And of course I was far away from the theater of war, but Antigua, West Indies, September the 1st, 1939, and that was the beginning of the Second World War. So there's something notable about that as far as I'm concerned.
Yes,
and being born in Old Road, Antigua, so in very real terms, that's home turf. And I'm not too conscious of exactly what life was like at that time. But I grew up in that environment, so I became familiar with the location and with some of the customs and the value systems that were quite active at about that time.
Okay. Do you know where you were born?
This was at Grace Bay Hill, yes. In the first Grace Bay Hill house. And at some point in my childhood, another house came onto the lot. So we got accustomed to referring to them as top house and bottom house. Best memories, I remember being very close to my parents. There's never any doubt at all that I'm sure many of my siblings felt the same way, but I always had a feeling of being loved. I did not grow up with ambivalent feelings about acceptance and about being loved. Of course, adult language, we use terms like those now. But looking back at it, I know how secure I felt. And I was around with my dad quite a bit, as he came and went, whether we were going down to the bay to swim or just to pass the time. I can remember spending a lot of time with Mom as she putted around, especially at the wash tub, as she did the laundry. Later on, she had help at the laundry while she was busy mending clothes and cooking and doing 1,000 other things that a mother of, but I'm number 10, so she was always very busy, managing the affairs of the home, the household. But I really have clear memories of being close to her and just sitting around her feet, as it were, while she mended clothes, or when she was ironing, or when she was laundering over the old scrubbing board, as we called it, and just chatting with her, and she trying to have me verbalize things, or maybe just reading a verse from the Bible. I know she had read a lot, from Messages to Young People, a lot of Ellen White's books on child guidance. I heard her refer to that repeatedly, even from early childhood. So maybe some of that wisdom that she applied to bringing us up, and of which I have so many memories, probably came from things that she had heard from preachers, or just picked up, in all kinds of ways from people who she felt were just wise.
My mother is Patricia Joseph. We call her Mommy. And I think she's the best mother in the whole world. She was very quiet. She was intelligent. She liked a lot of reading. And I always remember her reading, most of all, beside her Bible and singing from the church hymnals. I think her favorite books were medical books, because as a child I was introduced to a book, The Modern Medical Counselor. She always had that book in her spare time. I knew that book since I was a little child. Just, I think even before I could read it, you could just look at the pictures. Then you could ask Mommy anything about what's in the book.
My mother was gentle in character, an excellent mother and a disciplinarian, unassuming in almost every sense of the word. I sometimes believe she was ahead of her time. But That's what I believe about her.
No infighting because we could not fight. We were told not to fight. So hitting back and so on, even among siblings, was a no-no. And I remember as growing up that there was a neighbor of mine who was my age, Mr. Sheridan, Jim Sheridan, and we got into a scuffle one night. And I don't know, it didn't take me much to have had him on the ground. And while he was on the ground and I was over him, I was crying because I fast forward in my thoughts that Mommy's going to hear about this, and hearing about that I was in a fight with Jim, well, she's going to, do the rest on me. And I remember that distinctly. We could not fight at all. We had to respect everybody. The girls, we had to be very manly, among my sisters. We could not treat them roughly. We could not speak to them unkindly. And in the house, as small as the house was, we couldn't push a door. We couldn't push a door in that house without rapping, giving notice that we were coming in. Grew up respecting women. Up to this day, I think my respect for women, the treasure I have for them, how I look at them, is from my boyhood days.
So yes, early childhood, acceptance, being loved, being near and around Mom, and spending time with Papi. Time, we would just chat about all kinds of things, whether it's fishing or about the animals, or just people, or just talking Bible stories, or whatever it was that he found a little boy interested in discussing.
What about your father? What do you remember about him? Early memories?
Oh, I liked his strength, both physical and mental, his resolve, his dedication to what he did, an excellent provider. Those are the things I remember about my father, and a wise man.
And Papi never gave me money after a certain age, after the age of 12 or so. I can't recall Papi giving me money and say, John, this is it. No. He taught me how to care for a lamb or to care for a yoke kid, and that kid reproduced, and I had money. In fact, I even had money to buy my bicycle. I remember that. Well, yes, I believe but I knew he loved us, because even though he didn't have money to give us, he worked to make sure, to ascertain that not only we had an education, but we had food on our table. He wanted to know that there was enough food in the house for us. 13 of us,
But I can remember, right on Mount Carmel, on the other side of Winter Hill, which is what all old Rhodians knew that point to be, Winter Hill. Papi had 5 or 6 fish pots. Papi had 5 or 6 fish pots in the reef there, which was one of his favorite ways of fishing. Very efficient. And he and I went, because all the other boys had things to do. Typical Josiah Sunday morning village life, And they were relatively new pots. And when we finished the haul, we had 31 rock chugs. 31 rock chugs. And they weren't all that small. And they were all put in a crocus bag, just a gunny sack, wrapped up. And I had to head home from Tomnat with 31 rock chugs in a gunny sack on my head. Never forget, forget these things. And I wasn't a 15, 16-year-old strong guy. I was probably 12, 13, maybe. Because he had to go off to do other things. So he pulled the pots, we cleaned them out, and then he came with the fish for Annie to take care of, and the older sisters. And so right behind that vegetable building, comes the fish up there. So one of the jobs I know that we had to do sometimes on Sundays, or certainly during vacation time, would be to go into that area and patrol the boundary between the forest and the people's cultivated lands and keep our goats from intruding. I mean, sometimes you'd be there, you know, for 8 hours and you wouldn't have to drive any goats back because they were feeding somewhere else up in the hill. But you had to be there just in case they did decide to come to do it. Just, I mean, Papi would insist. He didn't want his animals eating people's cultivated stuff. So we had to be there to drive it back. Now, places like Dueg and so on that we're talking about would be typical morning. We'd have that flock come from Fort right along this road all the way past the Anglican church down along right through the coconut grove farmhouse, right? And then they would take their own freedom as to where they're going to graze. And normally the take-home group would be grazing Campbell Hill, and that shady slope you see there, coming right down to the valley bottom. And that's where they fed most of the day. So after school, we headed home, right at Grisby Hill, changed, and headed out for that same valley there. And when we got there, we would give them the call. And once they heard us, they knew it was time to go home. So and when they all were there, and you could tell visually when you had all the take-home bunch together, you just gave them another shout, and they knew that this was March. And then they would come all the way down through the coconut grove, and of course, and back down right through the village to Fort. And we had this big pen down there for them. Where the growth is there, you take the grass to where the growth begins, the higher growth begins. The big goat pen was right in that hollow. Yeah, so we brought them home in the evening, all the way from along the coconut grove and down through the village. And they came down here, and they just knew. I mean, nobody had to lead them or anything. They knew exactly where they were going. Up the hill here, through the village, taking them over to Nanton Pond, just on the other side of Cattle Pen Hill here, that I was pointing out the other day. And they would just, that's right, they just fan out for the rest of the day and feed. And they had two ponds. There was one over here at Tobacco Bay, and then there was Nanton Pond on the other side. So they had water. And then in the evening we'll go and bring them back. It looks like a long way, but we never thought of it in terms of distance. I mean, and it is far. If you stop to think about here, and you're going behind that hill every morning.
Through Carlisle?
Oh yeah. You go through the village, all the full length of the village that way. Then you went through Aunt Carol's Coconut Grove and Carlisle Bay, right over between those two hills, right? And sometimes across this hill, to still Cattle Pen Hill. And that valley over there is Tobacco Bay, you know.
Cattle Pen Hill.
This hill right in the foreground here is Cattle Pen Hill. And Richard Hollow is that valley straight ahead of us here. So you can see the slope of Cattle Pen Hill going down to the water. And then back of that you have Flagstaff, that big hill. And where that comes down is the saddle here. You have that nice valley right in there that we call Richard Hollow. Yeah.
Did you ever come down here at night?
Oh yes. Oh yeah. I mean, I used to love to go carry out. I used to just absolutely enjoy fishing out there at night, just in the moonlight.
Really?
Oh yes. There's ice.
You see,
That's when they bite. They're crazy in moonlight.
One time,
Yeah.
you and I went around, not too far,
That's
just
right.
around the rock.
That's right. There's a hump there.
And we caught so much blaze eye that night. It seemed as though it was a bed,
Oh man, we hit it.
a shoal,
Yeah.
blaze eye fish.
Yes. I remember Mommy came out one morning. I had gone fishing the night, and here was all this fish on the counter in the kitchen. She'd just shake her head, as if to say, "These boys." You know? Right down there.
Get the rock on it.
Oh man, that was good. Right where you see those rocks are there. Yeah. Deep hole between the rocks. And always had lots of fish in there. Yeah, we call it a round hole. And then
Much of my success in life academically has been because of tagging with Mike. He was a bookworm like Pappy. So he always had a lot of new books from the libraries or in his studies. And again, I would take those books and I would read, and I would read them. Every book he would bring, I would read, and he would talk with me. If he were reading a literature book, he would say, Ivy, come here. And he could sit we could both be together for 2 hours, and he would be telling me about this story in this book or what he was reading if it's a literature book. And so that was all going in. And so quite a number of my years were spent learning from Mike, tagging with him. And in the summer, as I grew older, in 14, 15, did my chores. And Mike, if he's finished his chores with helping Pappy over on the estate, and this was his time to take his book satchel and load it with mangoes or a big salsa, and he was going around the beach under this rock right below Uncle Alpha's house. There was a cave there, and that's where Mike would go to study, or we would go to look sugar apples up at the old school, pick as many as we can, and when they were ripe, then Mike is going to take 6 or so with him. And I would say, Mommy, can I go with Mike? And whenever Mommy said yes, because you finish your chores, it's your break time and his break time before the late afternoon when he would have to go back and I would be helping Mommy. We would go around those rocks. But I will tell you this, my older brother, 2 years older, would never allow me to walk around those slippery, steep rocks. I can remember the spot at which he would bend down, he would say, come, and he would allow me to ride on his back while and I would hold the satchel. He never allowed me to climb over the steep rocks, and that was in itself a high risk, because if you slipped, we would both go down on the rocks, right, until we reached the cave, and we would spend 2.5 hours in that cave, and Mike would be reading the books like Coral Island, Treasure Island, and some of his other literature books, and he would be talking and just sharing with me. So as I started climbing up the scale with the grades in school, I was ahead. I knew them. I knew because I learned them from my brother who was ahead of me. And this happened right through high school years, because I prepared for the senior Cambridge exams, which were marked in England, because I had Michael's model answers, for he had already gone through with flying colors. At the time, I had a tremendous memory, and so I memorized model answers, but they were from Michael's papers. So that's my life was molded very much by my brother, but my gentleman brother, because I was always taken care of as a younger sister, never ever roughed or left behind.
you grew up with these sounds in your head, you know? You hear them in your dreams almost. Yeah. I can still remember approaching ocean shores on the Oregon coast for the first time. And it was late at night when we were getting close to the water. And I'll always remember, even before we could see the ocean at Ocean Shores, Oregon, we could hear the Pacific waves breaking on the Oregon beaches. And it's amazing how that sound of the waves on the surf brought all of this back. It just came back with a freshness and a power that was really quite profound. You were at one with the ocean again. And every time I go to the Oregon coast, I sense that. But that first time at Ocean Shores, late in the night, when we couldn't even see the ocean, or we could smell it and we could hear the surf. So missing it? Yes and no. Because one always felt that it was not gone forever.